All right, we will call this November 10th meeting of the Transportation and Circulation Committee meeting to order. First, we'll have a roll call.
Committee Member Burnham.
Here.
France.
Here.
Green.
Here.
Horn.
Here.
Rodriguez.
Here.
Chair Blackerby.
Here. All right. Assuming there are no changes to the agenda. And I don't have any slips for public comment for items not on the agenda. Seeing none. We'll move on from that to the consent calendar, which is the approval of the minutes from our last meeting, which was on April 28th of 2016, believe it or not. So a motion to approve those minutes would be in order.
I'll make that motion.
Okay. Motion by Rodriguez, second by Horn. Any discussion on the minutes?
They were very thorough.
There you go. They were thorough.
Go on meeting, whoever.
Excellent.
Kudos to Kim for typing it all up.
Yes. Thank you for doing that. Okay. If there's no other discussion, we will vote on the approval of those minutes. All those in favor of approval say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Abstentions.
Abstaining.
France abstains. Great. Okay. So we'll move on to reports. Number 3 is MTD reports on the downtown waterfront shuttle for January through September, as we haven't had those reports in a while, and the traffic mitigation reports for the past 3 quarters and the annual report for 2016. So there we are.
Yes. So, Madam Chair, we have Steve Moss in the audience if you have any questions about the MTD reports. But yes, even in fact, the MTD report that we had in April, we didn't look at that one because of if you recall, we had a lot going on with the bicycle master plan at that time. So, so if you have any questions about those reports, that would be the time.
Okay. Mr. Brennan?
Madam Chair, Steve, how has it been going with putting extra shuttles on for the cruise ships?
Yes, good evening, Chair Blackerby and members of the committee. From what I understand, it's been going quite well. The cruise ship days, shuttles are usually quite full from what I understand.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Prince?
Chair Blackerby, Steve, if I could ask, make a quick comment or provide one quick piece of feedback. I think you've heard this before, but sometimes during the cruise ships, I have heard that the service may have been like the route was cut shorter in the regular route. And anyway, somebody wanted me to pass that on.
The extra shuttles that we put on for the cruise ship visits do a slightly different route than what the regular shuttles do. They go up in the mornings or in the early parts of the day. They go up State Street and then they express back down without passengers back because everybody's heading upstate at that time, and then they do that in reverse in the later part of the day to bring people back to the cruise ship. So the regular shuttles are doing their usual up and down, State Street and back and forth on the waterfront all day. The cruise ship shuttles, which are separate or different vehicles, are doing a slightly different route. So yeah, there will be probably on occasion some confusion maybe in some passengers. We try to alleviate that by having extra supervision out there and keeping everything in order.
So just to clarify that, so when there's the cruise ship service, that is sort of mixed in with the regular service.
Exactly.
Okay, and sometimes there might be some changes, but we try to adjust for that on the fly as possible.
Yes, that's right.
Mr. Green?
I'm curious, in terms of the funding, do the passengers on the cruise ship pay the 50-cent or 25-cent fare, and is it a break-even or a positive?
They do pay the same fare as everyone else, and we bill the I guess, the Waterfront department for that, who in turn bills the cruise ship for the cost of the service. And then the passengers pay the regular fare.
I was just going to ask Steve, just out of curiosity, can anybody that's just a citizen use the cruise ship ones?
Oh, yes, they're open to the
as well.
Yes, they're open to the general public. They're public transit. They just do a slightly different route than the other shuttles.
All right, thanks.
They're pretty stuffed with people if you can fit on them, but yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, Mr.
Madam
Burnham?
Chair. Steve, also, what's the normal port of call time frame for a cruise ship? Docking and then tendering in, because they have to anchor, I guess, quite a ways out, and then they tender in to shore, and then the passengers are allowed a time on shore before they have to return to the ship. What's that normal time frame usually?
I actually don't know the answer to that. I believe they're generally here most of the day. Maybe city staff can help with that.
Yeah, the cruise ships come in the morning at 7, usually here by 7,
Okay.
and then usually pulling up anchor at 7 in the evening.
Thank you. Okay.
Any other questions?
I had one. I looked at the reports online. I didn't bring them with me. How is it going vis-a-vis all that construction, near the Dolphin Fountain? It's been going on for an awfully long time, and how's that affecting the trends of ridership and revenue?
Anecdotally, we believe that has depressed ridership while the construction's going on. We don't have hard numbers on that, but it seems like there has a recent decrease in ridership over the last couple of years kind of coincides with that, and we think that's likely one of the reasons.
That's what I thought I saw when I read it, but yeah, a decrease. I was wondering why. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Madam Chair?
Yeah, Mr. Grant.
Steve, if I could ask another question. Where is MTD? Are they complete? Are they almost complete with the strategic plan update that you all are?
Yes, that was adopted by our board at the end of last year.
Okay, great. Follow-up question, out from left field. I know it's a very complex issue that you all have been looking into quite a bit in terms of like the fare box itself and ways to simplify for people having cash, similar to how downtown parking, you can use a credit card. Obviously, these are proprietary machines, and there's a lot of restrictions what you can do. But something like Apple Pay or any of those other new applications are, maybe this is a question for future, but are any of the vendors that provide like fare box technology looking into some of those new payment methods?
What I can tell you is our board just at a recent meeting approved the purchase of a new generation of fare boxes for all of our vehicles, which will have a lot of the technology capabilities that you're talking about. And we do intend to move in that direction in phases towards making the different kinds of fare media, ways to pay your fare available over the next 2 to 3 years anyhow. So we're definitely moving in that direction.
Cool. Thank you.
And Mr. Green?
I realize the size of the reports that are available for this meeting were complicated by the fact that we didn't have this on the agenda in interim time. But it led me to the question of reduction of some of the verbiage that is redundant from month to month. And I'd just like to at least raise that question, if that can be compressed or condensed. That might be a savings of paper.
I could certainly work with city staff on doing that. The required elements of the monthly report are data elements. So yeah, we could cut back on the amount of text in the reports.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? I had one, and it may be one for Rob, but I think recently there was an item at council about the Waterfront Shuttle and the city's participation in that funding. Could you tell us what that was about or what happened there?
Absolutely, that's something we're going to bring up. So as you know, the downtown Waterfront Shuttle is funded by the city of Santa Barbara in part, and then MTD also shares in that funding. And there are, at the July 1, we have a renewal date for our 5-year contract with MTD on Downtown Waterfront Shuttle. And so we're preparing for that renewal. The other thing that's happening is that you may have also heard, I think you've heard me say, and you probably have read, that the city of Santa Barbara is in a challenging time, a critical time for our road infrastructure and being able to repair and maintain our streets and roads. Never seen the funding stream this bad, and so we're not able to keep up. So one of the things we're doing is we're looking for different ways that we can ensure that the priority is to repave the streets so we don't lose the street and the potholes and things that the community is concerned about. So to that end, one of the things that is how that relates to the Downtown Waterfront Shuttle is there was about $650,000 coming out of the Streets Fund, a Measure A fund that's going to the Downtown Waterfront Shuttle. And so the Finance Committee, when it was talking about the infrastructure issue, this is the Council Finance Committee, has forwarded a recommendation to the City Council that'll be heard in a number of weeks to move the funding from Measure A to downtown parking and the waterfront department. So those two entities will be carrying the full burden of the 1.1 and change yearly cost, $1 million cost of the Downtown Waterfront Shuttle. Council has also assigned the Downtown Parking Committee as the liaison to Council for the shuttle. So all this is background. Oh, one more thing to tell you. And then the other thing that's important to say is that the shuttle has run its life. The vehicle itself has run its life. In fact, MTD has done a remarkable job keeping that shuttle, which is now 25 years old, going. In fact, buying retired shuttles from other communities and using parts and swapping out things and very successfully keeping it going. But now it's finally the season that they can't do that anymore. And if you recognize, there are some buses on the crosstown line. I don't know if you've noticed. I've seen some the larger buses on the crosstown. Yeah. The reason that is because they've had to, by necessity, retire those shuttles. So MTD has worked out a very good deal to actually acquire a new shuttle, a new electric shuttle. It'll be a little bit different than the one that we have now, which is 22 feet wide is the one we have now. It'll be the same width as the one we have now, but it'll be a 30-foot shuttle, open windows, and it'll be painted just like the shuttles that we have today. So those three things, the money, the contract, the liaison assignment to the Downtown Parking Committee, and the brand new shuttle, which will change the look and feel of the service. Because of those three things, we have the Downtown Parking Committee has put together an ad hoc Downtown Waterfront Shuttle committee. And that is 3 members of the Downtown Parking Committee, 3 members of the Harbor Commission, because they're both funders, and then 2 members of the MTD board. And so that committee is going to be meeting starting next week to talk about what are the goals for this 5-year. What is the goals of the shuttle for the downtown and the service? Is it the connectivity from the waterfront to the downtown? Is it people moving? What are these goals so that MTD and city staff can get together and negotiate a 5-year contract for that shuttle? So a good season just to take a look. Some of the other things that came out of that, the comments that came out of the discussion to date so far is that, it used to be that the shuttle really had a strong ownership downtown. It was our shuttle, and some of that has waned. So perhaps this process can also build more ownership because we're going to be inviting stakeholders from the Visitors Bureau and the Downtown Organization and the Chamber and other waterfront stakeholders to discuss the goals of the shuttle and how it serves State Street and the waterfront. So we just wanted you to be aware, and it's just kind of a transportation thing, but being funded by the Downtown Parking Committee, Council assigned that liaison role to them.
Okay. Question, yeah, Mr. Green.
when and where will this committee be meeting?
The committee, you won't see it on any website for now, because it's an ad hoc committee. It's not a public committee, but we are going to be inviting stakeholders. But if you'd like to attend, it'll be next Friday at 1:30 in this room.
Not tomorrow.
No.
18th.
That's right.
Okay. Oh, I guess one of the other questions, and maybe there's not, I know when project delivery date questions are always horrifying to everyone, but as far as the new fleet, do we know when that might happen?
If all stays on schedule, we hope to receive the new vehicles which are on order between January and March, and then they should be in service by spring. Don't know an exact date.
Great. Wonderful. Mr. France?
Hey, just a quick question on that, Steve. Is that a done deal? In other words, is like the procurement already complete on those vehicles?
Yes, we're outright buying 8. Well, let me back up a little bit. We currently have a fleet of 18 of the 22-foot shuttle, 14 of the 22-foot shuttles. We're replacing them all. They're all beyond their useful life.
Yeah.
We're replacing them with purchasing 8 of these 30-foot vehicles that Rob described, and then we're going to lease an additional 6. And that way we will, if when all is said and done, it ends up being a different vehicle long-term than this new 30-foot shuttle on the downtown Waterfront shuttle. The 8 that we're buying, we can repurpose on other services. The 6 that we're leasing, we would have the option of returning to the manufacturer. So that's why we're doing it that way. If, on the other hand, we end up everybody's happy with these vehicles as the long-term solution on the shuttle, then we'll probably likely buy out the lease on the other 6 and keep them.
Got it. So there's still flexibility.
Yes.
For looking forward to the next 5-year contract that could be used for like the Carpinteria Seaside Shuttle or something
Exactly.
like that. Okay,
and
cool.
the crosstown and even some of the other routes that we currently have the smaller diesel buses and hybrids on, potentially. So.
Very helpful.
Yeah, one good thing to keep in mind, and that Steve may want to talk about, is that this electric shuttle it really performs. It's not like the shuttles we have now, which let's hope that they last all day.
Yes, and I'm certainly not the expert on this, but I do know just from talking with coworkers that yes, these new ones, they have a newer, up-to-date battery technology, and they can do a longer duty cycle without needing a recharge, and can probably go up hills a little better and so on and so forth. So,
yeah. Great. Any other questions on MTD reports? Okay. Thank you,
Steve.
of course.
Fielding all of that. Oh, and public comment on the MTD reports? All right, seeing none. Next, number 4, recent and upcoming crosswalk enhancement projects. And it seems that Derek Bailey will be giving us that presentation.
Yes, Derek Bailey, our traffic engineer, will be giving this presentation.
Good evening, committee members. My name is Derek Bailey. I'm with the city's traffic engineering group. I'm just going to pass out some maps. It is part of the presentation. I am going to show these maps of just some of the projects that we're working on, but I'm going to blow through this particular slide pretty quickly, so you may want to look at it in more detail. So this evening, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the projects that we've got done in the last 5 years. We've got a good amount of pedestrian crosswalk improvements done in the last 5 years, but we've got an awful lot queued up. So I want to talk a little bit about that. Here's how the presentation is going to go. Why this effort was started 5 years ago, how we really started pushing forward with making a concerted effort to improve pedestrian crosswalk safety. I'm going to talk a little bit about just the whys, the mechanics of when we install a crosswalk, when a marked crosswalk alone is sufficient, and if it's not sufficient all by itself, what types of enhancements are needed to make it safe. recent and planned projects, and then opportunity locations. So why this effort started, a little over 5 years ago, a young man, Sergio Romero, was killed crossing Milpa Street at Ortega. And, when that happened, there was a really strong reaction from the community, really demanding better crosswalk safety, and particularly on Milpa Street. That's where the focus of the energy was going. But as staff, we really stepped back and said, okay, well, we've got these crosswalks on Milpa Street that need addressing, but where else in the city do we have similar conditions where pedestrians are at higher risk? So what we did is we inventoried all the crosswalks in the city, and we kind of did a risk assessment with each one, and we developed a list of crosswalks that needed some type of enhancement. And we've been going after funding and been very successful obtaining funding and programming improvements for each one of those crosswalks. So just why is a crosswalk installed? Just basic. There has to be a demonstrated demand. So the generally accepted principle for that is at least 40 pedestrians per hour. Or a school walking route. Crosswalks are used to delineate school walking routes. Or sometimes crosswalks are used to delineate alignment or path of travel issues, like if there's a weird crossing angle that needs to be addressed. Crosswalk markings can provide some guidance to pedestrians as to how they're supposed to get across the street. Some of the things that we look at, if there is that demonstrated demand for a crosswalk, we want to make sure there's good sight lines so that pedestrians and drivers can see each other and make good decisions. That's really important. Good lighting at nighttime. Pedestrians often don't realize how hard they are to see at nighttime, so we do want to make sure that there is good lighting for crosswalks. ADA access ramps are very important and a requirement. And as well, once we start looking at these characteristics, we also start looking at traffic conditions and traffic characteristics. And that really plays into whether or not a marked crosswalk by itself is good and is going to enhance safety and mobility for pedestrians, or if we need to do something more. And this table right here, I won't go into too much detail, but about 10 years ago, there was a pretty comprehensive study done and is now referred to nationwide as to what sorts of traffic and roadway characteristics are appropriate for what types of treatments. And really it boils down to this. If you have a multi-lane road, so more than one lane in each direction, higher volume streets, higher speed streets, or a history of collisions, with any one of those, that really tells us that marked crosswalks alone by itself isn't enough. Mr.
Can
Green.
you spell out the meaning of the letters in the grid
On your
on the previous page?
Can you turn on the mic?
Sorry. Can you spell out the meaning of the grid, of the letters inside the grid on the previous slide? CFNP.
I believe the C means crosswalk alone is sufficient. P means crosswalk with enhancements is okay. And N means that, I believe N means that an uncontrolled crossing is not appropriate. So in that kind of case, like especially the higher volume, higher speed streets on some of just picture like an Orange County arterial size street and speeds. For a street like that, you'd really need a traffic signal.
Thank you.
Oh, did I go too far? Okay. So types of enhancements that we use here in Santa Barbara. Signs and markings on multi-lane roads, road diets, median refuge islands, curb extensions, rectangular rapid flashing beacons, and lighting. All of these components have been used in a lot of the projects that we're developing right now. So I'll just run through them really quickly. Signs and markings. This can be a really inexpensive yet really effective safety feature. What I have shown up on the screen right now is a crosswalk with, there's 2 lanes going in one direction, and one vehicle is stopping right up at the crosswalk. And what happens is if a pedestrian steps off the curb, if there's a vehicle coming along in that second lane, it can make it really hard to see the pedestrian crossing. So here's a picture of something that we've done in Santa Barbara. This is Anacapa Street at Sola. And what it's showing here is we put what we call advanced yield lines about 40 feet ahead of the crosswalk. And that's just a visual cue to drivers as to this is where you should stop and yield to pedestrians. We also have the supplemental signs on either side of the road that say yield here to pedestrians. But when they stop that far back, and we like to see a good 40 feet away from the crosswalk, that gives pedestrians and drivers a chance to see around that first car that's stopped for pedestrians. So that's an inexpensive upgrade that we can do that's been quite effective. Road diet, this is Upper De La Vina Street right by Trader Joe's that's shown. This can be an effective treatment as well. We also did a few blocks on Milpa Street. An important characteristic with road diets or any type of lane restriction, lane reduction, is traffic volumes and traffic capacity. We're very sensitive to public sentiment here in the city, and we do want to make sure that in addition to enhancing safety, we're also maintaining traffic capacity and traffic mobility as well. It is a balancing act. Median Refuge Island, this is what we've shown here is just a picture from the Modoc Road and Las Positas Pathway project. This is a proposed median refuge island just west of Las Positas, so this would give access from the neighborhood and community north of Modoc Road to the pathway on the south side of the road. So what a median refuge island does is it's a waiting place. Pedestrians can cross half the road at a time, and they only need to analyze one direction of traffic at a time, so they can make a decision for traffic based on that first lane that they're going to cross, get to the middle, and then analyze the second lane. This median refuge island here, it's a treatment. You'll notice there's kind of a skew in the alignment through that median, and it's called a Danish crossing or a two-stage crossing. And just by when the pedestrians get to the center, it kind of forces them to turn to the right just a little bit. And by doing that, it makes them look towards that second direction of traffic. It's curb extensions, everybody's favorite. They've been controversial in Santa Barbara, no doubt. But really, the purpose behind them is to improve sightlines. And this graphic illustrates just how that happens. You can see the pedestrian at the end of the curb extension can much more easily see around parked vehicles, and drivers can see pedestrians a lot easier as well. It also reduces what we call the pedestrian exposure. So that's the amount of time and space that the pedestrian is out in the street and is susceptible to collision with a vehicle. Having been so controversial in Santa Barbara, we know that not everybody's in agreement that curb extensions should be used. In my opinion, what happened with the first generation of curb extensions in Santa Barbara that went in, about 10 years ago now, is that actually were a little bit too aggressive, and they came out into the street a little bit too far. So we're very careful now about how we design them, and we make sure that there's a good buffer between the vehicle path of travel and the curb extensions. We're trying to reach a happy medium, realize the safety benefits, and as well preserve good vehicle mobility. One of the things that some of the detractors to curb extensions will point out is that there's little evidence to suggest that curb extensions are effective. And it's true that there haven't been a lot of studies done nationally as to the success rate of curb extensions, and even locally, the before and after data that we have for collisions is really limited. There wasn't a lot. the locations that went in about 10 years ago didn't have a lot of collisions before, so there hasn't been any since. But there's really not any change. So it's not really something that's we can say as conclusively, yes, it's much better. But that being said, the Federal Highway Administration and Caltrans both, two really leading transportation agencies in the state and the country, endorse curb extensions. And it all goes back to the basic engineering principles that we're trying to address here, and that's improve sight lines and reduce pedestrian exposure. Those are really basic engineering principles. So if we can achieve that while maintaining good vehicle mobility, it is a good tool to have in our toolbox. So from a sightline perspective, why is that important? This graphic here shows the perspective of a driver looking down the street and just how they focus on the horizon right down the middle of the road. So when you have pedestrians trying to enter the roadway from outside of that cone of vision that we call, that's where sightline issues can happen. So if we can move that starting and ending point of the pedestrian's trip across the street closer to the middle of that cone of vision, the driver is more likely to recognize that pedestrian. Curb extensions are expensive. Yep. And for that reason, they aren't appropriate at each and every intersection, and we do use them sparingly. This is De La Vina and Figueroa, so this is the before condition, before curb extensions. If you can just imagine the water flows down the curb line right now, and water is really the reason these things can get so expensive. Here's the after picture. You can see how the curbs come out into the road now. We were very careful designing these curb extensions. The lanes are 14 feet wide going past the curb extensions. A normal Caltrans freeway lane, by way of comparison, is 12 feet. So these are 14 feet. So there's that added buffer. Each corner was individually tailored to the traffic movements. This corner right here on the northwest corner of the intersection has a large radius, so it's a lot easier for trucks to turn around that corner. And even here on the southeast corner of the intersection, we didn't even put a curb extension there. Again, because when larger trucks have to turn that corner, we didn't want to impede their movement. Mr. Green?
You use, when we were talking about the bike plan, $300,000 for a signal. What's a rough figure for curb extensions?
300,000, yeah, or more. They can be very expensive. And this graphic right here helps illustrate why. So this is a cross section of a road we're looking at. And you can see this is what we call the crown of the road, how it comes up a little bit in the middle. And the purpose of that is for drainage. So when it does rain, and someday it will, water sheds off to the side of the road. And if you can think back to that first slide, how the water flows down that curb line on De La Vina Street, well, what happens when we do this and bump the curb lines out? We're bumping the curb lines out into a higher place of the road. So because water does not flow uphill, unfortunately, it makes constructing them more expensive, and we have to do some pretty significant grading. So that's where the costs really start adding up with curb extensions. The rectangular rapid flashing beacons, we've had a really positive response from both drivers and pedestrians. We've got about a dozen of them in the city right now, and we've got about another dozen planned. The reason drivers like them, it's easy to recognize when pedestrians are there. In some areas of the city, visually, there's so much going on that it can be hard to see pedestrians on the corner waiting to cross. And pedestrians like them because the yielding rates for them have gone way up.
May I ask a question at that point?
Yes.
Sometimes I'm on Milpas quite a bit, and I go past these, and once in a while there will be everything's flashing and nobody's around. I wondered if there's something about the functionality that people walk fast and the lights last longer than the people. I don't know what it is, but I'm like, why is it flashing? I don't see anybody trying to cross.
That's a great question. 2 reasons. The flashers in Milpas were the first ones that we installed in the city. And when we did it, we used solar-powered flashers, and each one of them had a little radio. So when the button was activated on one side of the street, it would send a signal across to the other ones that I'm on. You turn on too. And so they would activate. What we found is that there's some background radio interference that would trigger these things sometimes. And so just what you experienced, flashers would go off for no reason and when nobody was around. And that's actually a really bad thing because drivers see that and they're like, well, there's no pedestrians here.
Wolf, yeah.
Right, exactly. So what happens if that happens a few times in a row? And every time the driver is arriving at an intersection, if these things are flashing, they lose respect for the flashers. So the flasher really has to mean that there's a pedestrian presence. So we've since gone and retrofitted the flashers on Milpas so that everything's hardwired together, so there's no background interference that can affect that. As far as the timing goes, we do have to provide the lights have to be on a long enough time for vehicles to stop and pedestrians to get across the street. But we don't want them on so long that the same thing, the things are flashing for 20 or 30 seconds after the pedestrian's long gone, because it's the same effect. Drivers lose respect for the flashing lights. So we have to be careful about how we time them. We do notice too, sometimes when pedestrians walk by, they just hit the button and just keep walking up and down the street. So we don't have a good fix for that, unfortunately. But the flashers that we've installed since are all hardwired together. So that's a lesson we learned in the first installation. Mr. Green.
Mr. Burnham had a...
Mr. Bailey.
I believe that the vehicle code does not require a stop on a flashing yellow if there's nobody in the intersection, for instance, and nobody in the crosswalk. Is that true?
That's true.
Mr. Burnham?
Yeah, Mr. Bailey, a point of housekeeping, are you giving this or a similar presentation before the Access Advisory Committee tomorrow morning? I thought I saw it on the agenda.
No. You're
not? Okay.
I won't be there tomorrow.
I do have some questions then.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
I mean, unless...
well, let's see.
Hang on, Mr. Bailey, would you like to
if you're done
finish the presentation?
Then I'll ask questions.
I'll keep going. Perhaps I'll answer some of them along the way, but happy to answer some at the end.
Okay.
Like I mentioned, we've got about a dozen of them, the flashing beacons in the city, and we've got about another dozen planned. They're not appropriate for everywhere in the city, and we aren't going to be able to install them everywhere in the city. Maintenance is an issue. We do have only 2 electronic technician traffic signal maintenance personnel in the city, and we've got a really high number of electronic devices in the city compared to the number of technicians that we have to maintain them, and so that's a real limitation for us. So we're really focusing on the really high-profile crosswalks that are really especially challenging for pedestrians to get across, but this is one of our limitations, is we're after the next dozen or so go in, we're going to have to say we can't do any more and maintain them. Neighborhood compatibility is an issue. Think about bright yellow flashing lights outside of somebody's bedroom. So we do have to be careful where we install them. Not all crosswalks are appropriate for the flashing beacons. And an interesting thing that seems to be happening is, are we training drivers to ignore pedestrians at locations that don't have the RRFBs? About a month ago, we were doing some crosswalk enforcement with the police department on Coast Village Road. And what we do at crosswalk enforcement is we have city staff members that just walk back and forth across the street, and tucked around the corner is our traffic enforcement police officers. And when a vehicle doesn't yield, then they pull them over and they get ticketed appropriately. There was one driver that made a really interesting comment last month. He didn't yield, and he got a ticket. And his complaint was, well, there were no lights flashing here to tell me that there was a pedestrian present. You know, technically the answer is it doesn't matter. You're supposed to yield to a pedestrian in a crosswalk with or without the flashing lights. But are we training drivers to be looking for these flashing lights but not looking for pedestrians at other locations? So again, I think that really plays into only treating the locations that are, you know, especially busy, especially hard to get across, and some of the more smaller neighborhood type streets, we really need to send that message that they need to be on the lookout for pedestrians. Lighting is a very important feature. Like I mentioned, pedestrians often don't realize how hard they are to see at night. And so with just about any crosswalk project that we're doing right now, there is a lighting component to it. Here's that map that I passed out. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but the red stars are the locations that are already completed. Thanks, Rob. So I think we've completed 13 in the last 5 years, and we've got 23 more funded. So that's really great news that the best is yet to come in terms of safety improvements for pedestrians. I'm going to run through a few of them. I'm not going to run through all 23, but just to give you an idea of what we've completed and what we have coming up. State Street in Kaipala, Colorado. This is right next to Mackenzie Park up on Outer State Street. This is a before picture, so this shows 2 lanes in each direction. Really wide street. You can see the ladder style crosswalk there. This was our number 2 location in the city for pedestrian involved collisions. Yeah, really challenging to get across. And this is the after picture. So we completed this earlier this year. So this is a really great example. We threw just about every feature in our traffic engineering toolkit at this one. You can see on the south side of the road here, there is a curb extension that takes up what was in line with the parking aisle. Again, we were very careful that the design would not affect vehicular movements, so that curb extension moves the pedestrian starting point out into the middle of the street. It moves the position of the flasher itself out into the middle of the street, so it's easier for drivers to see. We've got our advanced yield lines, so drivers know to start a yield to the pedestrians in advance of the crosswalk. We've got our median refuge island, and it doubles as a good location for a second flasher that improves visibility for the driver. And as well, there was good lighting out here already. So there's 3 lights that are right close to this crosswalk. Oops, wrong way. As far as upcoming projects, one that's going to be happening really soon is Upper De La Vina. This you can think up by Trader Joe's, and up in that area there's 4 uncontrolled crosswalks along that stretch of Upper De La Vina. Our project this winter that's going to happen is going to address 3 of them. We'll be installing the pedestrian activated flashers and some new lighting at one of the intersections. The 4th one at Vernon, that's not going to happen for a few years. There's a bridge over Mission Creek that's right beside that intersection, and the improvements to that intersection will happen along with the bridge. So, but those top 3 right there, that'll be happening this winter. Old Coast Highway, this is an exciting project in partnership with the Parks and Recreation Department in the city. They're going to be installing a new playground near the tennis courts, a really great project. As they were envisioning this project, you know, the things we were thinking about is, well, how are people going to get there? There's some really dense multifamily housing on the north side of Old Coast Highway, and it seems logical that families from those multifamily housing units are going to want to get to the new playground. So there will be a new crosswalk going in, and as well some new sidewalk. There's a second project, a Measure A project, that's going to complete the sidewalk all the way over to Salinas Street, and that's unfortunately going to lag by a few years. But it's really great we're able to do this much immediately. This is a plan for the intersection. Old Coast Highway is pretty high speed coming from Montecito, like 45, 50 miles an hour is pretty routine. There's also some visibility issues right at this particular location because there is a bit of a bend in the road. So because of the visibility issues, we are going to install a curb extension with the flashers, and there is good lighting at this intersection. Carpinteria Voluntario. So this project is being funded by the Active Transportation Program. It's an existing all-way stop intersection, and it's also number 4 in the city for the number of pedestrian-involved collisions. So despite being an all-way stop. So we were able to obtain funding from the Active Transportation Program to install curb extensions. Here, we're expecting that the curb extensions are going to improve stop sign compliance because it's moving that stop sign out into the road, closer to the vehicle path of travel, and as well the pedestrian exposure that we talked about, the amount of time and distance that pedestrians are actually in the street is going to be decreased. So we're expecting safety to be greatly improved with this project. 2 intersections on Upper Lucumbre. There is a companion project to these to fill in all the missing sidewalk gaps on the east side of Lucumbre Road. So it'll be continuous sidewalk from State Street all the way up to Pueblo, which is into Santa Barbara County. There are 2 school crosswalks along Lucumbre Road that we'll be installing flashers for. The first one should be sometime this winter, and the second will be about a year from now. Alamar and Puesta del Sol, if you can remember, a few years ago there was actually a crossing guard that was hit at this location. So about a year from now, this location will be installed. There'll be curb extensions, flashers, and better lighting at this intersection. Allen Road and Cliff Drive, this is near Hendry's Beach. This location, Cliff Drive is really wide right here. There is what we call a painted median, so there is a median refuge, but it's just paint on the ground. It's nothing substantial. So here is a drawing of the improvements. We're actually going to be installing a raised island right there along with the roundabout project, which construction starts next week, by the way. So by next spring, there'll be an improved crossing from the Allen Road neighborhood to the beach. And as well, the islands will help with the alignment leading into the roundabout as well. So it'll all act as a system with the roundabout. Peter's going to talk a little bit about this later, but the Westside ATP project, we just got some great news within the last few weeks that we're going to be recommended for the award of an ATP grant.
Stealing Peter's thunder.
I know. Peter, sorry. Okay, well, I'll just talk about the intersections.
It's not appropriate about this agenda item, all right? We need to wait till the next one.
I'm sorry. So even though the project itself is really a bike improvement, there are definite pedestrian benefits to the project. There's going to be a new pedestrian crossing near Super Kukas at Micheltorena and Dutton, so help pedestrians get across Micheltorena. And then all the way up and down Sola Street, there's going to be either new traffic signals or improved crossings for pedestrian and bikes. So the north part of downtown will have a lot of really great pedestrian amenities. The East Side ATP project, again, it's mostly a bike project. It also includes some sidewalk infill on Aliso Street, and as well as some crosswalk improvements at Cannon Perdido and Nopal next to Santa Barbara Junior High School. And as well, we're going to be making some ADA improvements next to Santa Barbara Junior High School. Those existing flashers that are there right now, they're about 3 feet away from the ramp, so if somebody with a wheelchair wants to activate the button, they can't reach it. So we're going to be making some corrections to the existing conditions. So that's all the projects I'm going to go over. There are more, but the last slide I want to leave you with is, even though we have these 23 upcoming projects in the next few years, there are areas of opportunity in the city that are potential other crosswalk improvement locations. There's 3 crosswalks on Coast Village Road that are very busy. You know, the east end of Haley and Coda, like Coda and Olive, Haley and Olive, very, very busy intersections and can be challenging for pedestrians. Lower De La Vina, so De La Vina and Cannon Perdido, De La Vina, De La Guerra, those are busy intersections. There's several intersections kind of around the north perimeter of downtown that can be difficult as well, like De La Vina, Victoria is a busy one. There's multiple intersections along Chapala, even when you get up into Anacapa and Santa Barbara up near the parks. San Andreas, very heavily walked corridor, lots of opportunity there. And of course, we've heard from the residents up on Cliff Drive that they'd like some improved crossing points along their street as well. So those are some future opportunities. Funding is always a challenge. We've been very fortunate up to now to get grant funding for just about every project that we've done. You're all well aware of the maintenance issues that we're struggling with in the city right now, and just how we're really focusing what city money we have towards maintenance. So these grants really shore up our ability to do pedestrian improvements. These intersections that we're showing for areas of opportunity might be more challenging to get grant funding for. They might not compete as well, just based on some of the traffic characteristics and the collision histories at these locations aren't as high as the ones we've already done. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
We'll take questions, and then if there's any public comment on this, turn in your slips. Thanks. Yeah, Mr. Burnham.
Mr. Bailey, first of all, one improvement we've noticed is the installation of the signal light at De La Vina and Arriaga, and I know it creates one more signal along De La Vina, which has been a little surface street freeway for years with a few lights, but also the 3-way stop at Arriaga and Bath, and I know that's because it's an artery to and from the freeway. That I think it's probably, I don't know what your data shows, but it really cuts down on it's probably cut down on the accidents that have happened at that intersection. So that, to me, that's a real improvement. The question I wanted to ask you is, given the small population of us who are blind and visually impaired, I can think of at least 2 scenarios where there's a real challenge, and that is you cannot cross Carrillo on the west side of Chapala, and you cannot cross Garden on the south side of Gutierrez. And I believe that's because of left lane traffic or something. Can you explain? Because I'm sure there's signage for people with vision, but for someone like me, I've had to have people stop me from crossing those intersections because there was nothing to tell me that I couldn't cross there. So can you explain that a little bit, please?
Committee Member Burnham, yes, you're exactly right. There are very heavy left turn volumes at both of those locations. And due to the conflicts with the pedestrians, that's why there are not crosswalks at either one of those locations. There are signs at each location, and you're absolutely right. It's with the configuration of the ramps at both of those locations, it's almost impossible to get another type of queue in there that it's not a crossing place. On the north side of Chapala and Carrillo, next to Ralph's, that corner, there is a railing blocking off the crosswalk. So
okay.
It does, that particular corner does direct pedestrians across Chapala at the appropriate location.
Yeah.
But the traditional ramps that we have in the city that they go around the corner and they lead pedestrians directly out into the intersection. It's almost impossible to install that same type of railing system at that ramp configuration.
So given the technology, and you already have audio signals at Creo and Chapala, down the line, is there room for expansion in that technology to include some kind of audio signal that says you cannot cross this intersection, let's say at Garden, or you cannot cross Garden on the south side of Gutierrez?
With that particular message, no. We are limited by federal standards as to what information we can provide to pedestrians through those audible push buttons.
Okay.
But by way of providing those buttons, it does provide a cue as to where the crossing is. In other words, if there is no button for the crossing that doesn't exist, that in a way does send a message that there is not a crossing there. But as far as how we're able to use those crossing buttons and giving that message that there is no crossing here, that's not an approved message that we're allowed to use.
Okay. But Carrillo, you do have the solution of the railing. It's just the one at Gutierrez and Garden that's still a safety challenge, I think.
That's a really great point. We work with the Braille Institute locally, and we've been to the Access Advisory Committee to get ideas for which intersections are a priority for the buttons. We are trying to do 1 or 2 systems a year. They're about $5,000 each, so we aren't able to do the whole city all at once. But we are trying to roll more and more of them out. So Garden and Gutierrez, that's a really great point with that particularly unique condition with the lack of a crossing on that one location that we should talk about.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Other questions? Yes, Mr. France?
I've got a question and a comment, if that's all right, Chair Blacker.
I just want to see if there's any public comment. I want to save comments to after that, but it doesn't seem like there is yet, so go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. My first question is, I guess it'll be interesting, and I assume we'll have public process for the projects for the ATP, like the west side and the east side, and it'll be very interesting intersection treatments for both pedestrians and for bikes for Bicycle Boulevard. I know there's some interesting stuff out there. I'm really curious to see what all you all will initially propose and what the public process might finish up with. Mm-hmm. Is that correct? There'll be more public process about the specifics?
Yeah, definitely. There will be a public process. With bike boulevards, we've got a toolkit, so to speak. There's a number of different treatments that can be used on bike boulevards. Obviously on the Sola Bike Boulevard, there's going to have to be some traffic signals. But there's going to be various other types of treatments available at the intersections for bike mobility, maintain the types of traffic volumes and speeds that we want to maintain just to make it a comfortable bike boulevard, and working with the community to tailor that menu is going to be very important. So yes, that's coming.
Great, and I apologize because that is coming up on our agenda. But here's my comment. It's kind of a crazy idea, but I know that in communities like in Tucson, Arizona, not too far from Mesa, stormwater infiltration in the parkways are common projects, and I was heartened by the project that you all did with creeks with the pavers adjacent to Santa Barbara Junior High School right by Ortega Park with the pavers. And the crazy idea I have for you all is for future curb extensions, since certainly drainage is one of the big challenges. It'd be very interesting if Creeks Department was interested to collaborate on a stormwater infiltration test project. Because especially if you're taking up space, like for example there, State and County That's I don't know what the topography is there exactly. It's a little bit flat, but let's say in some of that space that's a buffer of the parkway, there could be stormwater infiltration. Maybe that could be done in partnership with creeks, and who knows, maybe there's cost savings in terms of putting into the storm water, drain, or crazy idea. So just offer that up.
Sure. So we've broached the topic with creeks about that, and they weren't extremely receptive. Their focus right now is on creek restorations, and the direction that they're getting from the creeks, the city staff members, the direction they're getting from the creeks committee members is that these types of projects need to comply with the stormwater requirements. And so basically that means, when we're changing the configuration of a road like this, all the new hardscape that we're adding, we have to find a way to infiltrate that. And so the question really is, can we upsize these infiltration points to capture more than just the area that we're adding? And their response to that has been, no, not yet. Their focus is on creek restoration. Maybe there's opportunities in the future, but for now they're really leaning on these projects to do that infiltration on their own. This one here at Kaipala, Colorado, and State Street, although you can't see it, there's actually a huge stormwater infiltration point here. What happens is the water flows from the Samarkand neighborhood down Samarkand Drive, around De La Vina, and flows down this curb line all the way over towards Las Positas. There's a drain inlet just beyond the flasher there, and it drains into some underground chambers here. So everything that's captured from the Samarkand neighborhood infiltrates under this curb extension. So we do stuff like that. It's just that we're having to do it through our projects, and it is a very expensive component of our projects, and it's really driving the prices up. And we would welcome help to implement our projects, but right now we're having to do that on our own.
All right. Yeah, Ms. Horn.
Since we're doing left field,
But remember, we're doing things that are about the agenda items.
Okay.
So not too left field.
okay, I just wondered if there's been any investigation of the kind of permeable sidewalks. I don't know if how they would compare to concrete, but EcoPath, I think, out of Santa Maria or somewhere like that. The Botanic Garden is starting to use that all through as paths through their gardens, and just wondered if that has ever been considered, or if it was just not anywhere near as durable as concrete.
I'm actually not familiar with that material, so I can't comment whether or not our engineering design folks have evaluated that. I'm sorry. I can tell you, like, for example, the Upper Lucumbre Road sidewalk infill project that's going to make that continuous sidewalk along the east side of the road. There is going to be a lot of permeable concrete on that project because unlike this project here, where we were able to build these underground chambers to capture everything, there is no parkway on Upper Lucumbre Road. So if we didn't have permeable concrete, the water would just flow right into the street and down the gutter. So because of the stormwater treatment requirements we have, we were kind of locked into that type of treatment. But yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that material.
Well, the permeable concrete is a step up for drainage.
Yep.
And holding the water.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's great. Thanks.
Yeah, Ms. Rodriguez.
Yeah, I just have a comment. I lived up on the Cliff Drive area for many, many years, and now I live down in Hidden Valley. And I'm just, from like a 40-year perspective, Cliff Drive has always been really fast, and now it's gotten worse. But the shopping mall has all been upgraded and remodeled. Lazy Acres, of course, is very busy. And now the new traffic circle is going to go in, down at the foot of the hill. And I'm just envisioning, it would just be so nice. I just want to make a pitch, since you've highlighted that area, for, even inexpensive medians with some plants, some small things along anything that can be done along Cliff Drive to make the traffic slower. I just see it more as a boulevard. It could be a real pleasant boulevard, I think. And I've watched it change over all these years, and it's still very difficult to get across, from Edgewater and Mohawk and those streets. You can't cross, and it's even difficult down at the main intersection. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, no, thank you. You share that vision with a lot of Mesa residents, and unfortunately, our barrier is funding. That type of improvement is not something we can get a grant for, so it would have to be city funding, and it's competing directly with maintenance money right now. So with the shortfall in maintenance money that we have, unfortunately, those types of improvements are hard to come by these days.
No, I just want to keep it on the table.
Yeah, no, we would love to implement some community desired projects up there, and we are keeping our eyes open for grants if they do become available, but thus far we haven't had any luck.
Well, what I'm picturing is the one crossing that you did down on Cabrillo that seems to be so significant in stopping traffic, and I apologize, I can't remember the cross street, but you just put in a little pedestrian island and some striping, and it has really significantly slowed down moving through that area, and it's just one crosswalk. Yes, and the island has some little plants in it, and you just kind of feel like you can slow down a bit, and I think plants make a big difference. They really, really do. So anyway, we'll see.
Great, thank you.
You bet.
Other questions or comments? Yeah, Ms. Horn?
I just have one other thing to tag on to what Kathleen was saying. I live on the Mesa still, and there are several businesses. There's a business association up there now, and there's activism happening about Cliff Drive still. And last I heard at a meeting last month, some of those businesses up there have really started a drive to raise money to make some improvements. And I just wondered, how does that fit with the city's funding? And is that even possible to work with another private organization?
Yeah, we've been in contact with the business association there, and we helped develop some ideas. There's 3 or 4 crossing locations on Cliff Drive that really make a lot of sense. Just west of the shopping center, there's Oliver and Camino Calma. One of those two would be really great for the neighborhood to the south to cross, so they don't have to go all the way down to Meigs in order to double back. Santa Fe, near
that's the other big one.
The seniors' residence, Santa Cruz near the church, and getting down towards Cliff Drive or City College, pardon me. There's bus stops on either side of the road, students crossing all day long. So, there's really 3 or 4 locations all the way along the corridor that make a lot of sense. And so we were talking to the business community up there just about, how much is this stuff going to cost in order to do something that's going to be effective. And, they said they were going to work on that. For the city, I can't speak for the policymakers. There might be some interest in matching funding if that were proposed, but we're just in such a predicament right now with our maintenance funding that we've got such a need, and we're trying to focus so much of our resources just towards keeping up as best we can with maintenance. So it's such a challenge.
Yeah, I understand that. Thanks.
Thank you. Questions? Anything else? Well, thank you for this, and thanks for making the best of the situation with no money, but getting the grant funding for all these different projects. So we really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Number 5 is the Bicycle Master Plan and Active Transportation Program grant results and early project implementation. And Mr. Franz?
Madam Chair, I believe that later on in this item, there'll be discussion of an area on Haley. where I'll choose to recuse myself because the organization I work for owns a building on Haley Street.
Okay.
We'll let you know when that happens.
Okay, so we'll sort of
Just wanted to
bifurcate that.
Yeah, we could do that. I just wanted to intro this item. The TCC is very familiar with what we went through on the bike plan. And you will recall that when we were working with the neighborhood on the west side, the two neighborhoods, the west side on the other side of the freeway and the Micheltorena neighborhood, that we really had to adjust our project to the city project for getting access to the west side, creating the Sola Bike Boulevard and the Chino Bike Boulevard. And if you recall, one of the items we talked about in that was that, are we going to have the funding for such projects? Because they're way more expensive than just removing parking in the bike lane. So we are to create the bike lane. So we're very, very pleased to present, and we already spilled the beans a little bit, and you probably already heard. The city of Santa Barbara has been nominated by the CTC staff to receive $7.1 million, approximately for the west side portion, access to the west side, which will be that Sola Bike Boulevard, and Green Lane over Micheltorena, and the Chino Bike Boulevard. And then also, Peter's handing out the media release we did. And then also the East Side Access Project, which is the Haley Coda Green Lanes and the Alisos Bike Boulevard, and a smattering of other projects. So it's absolutely phenomenal. The city of Santa Barbara has been unusually successful at getting active transportation planning grants. This particular round, we received 4.4% of the total pot that was available to the state, even though we are a fraction of 1% of the population. So that is just a testament to our staff. Derek's left, but Derek and Peter, exceptional staff, and a number of other people who actually score these projects. You remember we were telling the council, we told the council, we think that we might get it. It'll just be on the cusp. And we told them the points we thought we would get, and we were within 1 point of that. So, and we were just on the cusp, 3 projects away from not getting it. So, that on that west side project. So we're very pleased, and Peter has all sorts of great things to update you on the bicycle master plan. So I'm sure you'll enjoy this item.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dayton, Chair Blackerby, members of the committee. I'll drop a few more names because really part of our success is about the team. Many cities have a person, a poor soul, I would call that individual, that has to do all this work and get an application, but we divvy it up into areas of expertise and drawings and the engineering portions as well as the written portion. So Ashley Shue and her team, Andrew Grubb, Alex Ubaldo, Eric Goodall, Lori Yanez, Jessica Grant, who's now in community development, stuck around just long enough to help us with some of this, and of course Rob and Derek as well. So a strong team, and the proof of that is in the millions of dollars that will be coming our way. So Rob and I crunched these numbers that he said 4.4% of the statewide money. We have 0.25% of the population, so that's an 18 factor difference. Many applications came in, nearly $1 billion requested. That the exact number is in your press release. And we got 3 of the 50 that were awarded around the state. So the big ticket items, I'm going to break these down a little further along in terms of their detail. But the Westside Bike Boulevard Gap Closure Project is a lumping of 3 or 4 bicycle master plan projects that you are all very familiar with because of your input in that plan. And I also just wanted to say anecdotally, it is so nice to talk about projects instead of plans. The planning process for this was so intense and community driven that it is very nice to talk about the fruits of that labor. East Side Green Lanes, we'll talk about which package of bicycle master plan projects are included in that Bicycle Boulevard Gap Closure project. And then we'll talk about why one costs almost twice as much as the other. Do we have any more good news? Yes. In June, the SBCAG board awarded us...
So real quick, I'm just thinking that, Mr. France, I don't know how we're going to be able to really like split this up for this item, so I think it might be good for you to just go.
Got it.
Great.
Abundance of caution.
Yes, thank you. And you can come back for item 6.
Yeah, we can
Sorry about the
come get you
pause.
when this
I saw the
item's over.
word Haley and
Yeah, good call. So the Measure A Green Lane conflict striping project was awarded for nearly $500,000. And what we're doing is looking at Lower State Street, Coda and Haley Streets, Micheltorena and Sola, and connections to Alisos and Chino. So this project is really about the photos that you see there. So most difficult areas for cyclists and pedestrians, as a matter of fact, are at the intersections to get across. And so these tools help us improve safety by really calling out the visual clues. Because we were awarded this money prior to knowing whether we get the ATP money, we have a lot more flexibility, and this money can go a long way because we also have Green Lane money from the ATP project as well.
yeah, Mr. Green.
On that slide, there are 2 colors of green. Which are you using?
There's only one that's allowed by FHWA. One thing that they don't have is a strong enforcement effort, so they can't go to every single community now and say, oh, that green is 2 shades off. We will use the one that's closer to the one on the left, which is the FHWA approved one.
Thank you.
So what about other BMP improvements that we are not going to fund through grants? Upper De La Vina between Constance and Padre is slated for a road diet. We're going to convert one traffic lane to a bike lane. Between Mission and Carrillo, we will need to keep both traffic lanes for vehicle movement. And you'll see Lower De La Vina number 7 is a similar case of new Class 2s between Cannon Perdido and Haley Streets. We can also do the new bike lanes on Ortega next year between Santa Barbara Street and Quarantina. Rancheria, as you recall, the Lower Westside project, we're going to get that in as soon as we can in 2017. The Haley Class 2 is going to really connect that Lower De La Vina project to Chapala. And then if you know the city well, you know that after Chapala, in the eastbound direction is where the Class 2 currently picks up. So it's going to start the lane 2 blocks prior. Castillo Contraflow is that 1400 block of Castillo between Sola and Micheltorena. That is a key connection to get people from the Sola Bike Boulevard over to the Micheltorena Bridge and over to the west side. And then the Bath Castillo couplet, we pushed out another year. The main reason for that is because of the signal configurations that Derek would love to talk about. He loves traffic signals. But we're going to have to reconfigure how those operate. Dedication of left turns coming in and out of Bath and Castillo on Mission. And so that's going to be a little more complex. And so we're going to address that after these projects are done. So this is not so much so that you can all read, but so that you know there's a comprehensive list of greenback sharrows. So we heard from the community that the existing sharrow program isn't ideal. We need higher level facilities. We also have had lengthy discussions about our narrow street network and inability to put in protected or Class 2 lanes everywhere we'd like. So on the low volume, residential or otherwise appropriate streets, we can put in the greenback sharrows. Here's it's going to come in right here. There's the letter. We got the approval from FHWA. It's a lot of work, but they have authorized us. We're one of the very few communities nationwide that is allowed to use this tool now. And what we've told them is that list that's on the left, Cabrillo, Cannon Perdido, Ortega, Coda, and Camino de la Luz, we want to put in greenback sharrows on those streets first to see how they work and to see where cyclists position themselves and how drivers are interacting with cyclists that are taking the lane. So this is a look. I pieced this together. Really, one of the things we talked about during the bicycle master plan process was this question of closing the gaps in the network and having a contiguous network. So this network here, which is all new, some of it is upgraded, Class 2s to green lanes. Others of it they don't exist. So these projects are brand new. So this is a look at how cyclists are going to have really high quality routes to choose to go around town. People will come on and off of these as they have destinations, be they residential or commercial, but many cyclists, we believe, will choose these routes because of their improvements that they will be receiving in the coming years. So I'm going to walk you in greater detail from the top part of Chino, where Modoc Road goes out. Many bicycle commuters take this out to UCSB and points towards Goleta. For reference, this is the De La Vina Green Lane and Chapala Green Lane they're going to go in. This is State Street. We've got Haley and Coda here. And as we walk through this slide, we'll look at Chino, the green lane over the bridge, Castillo, coming across on Sola. The connections where both projects, both the Westside project and the Eastside project, come together around the high school. And then we'll take a peek at treatments on Alisos. So, Derek, our presentations are coordinated in the sense that he went over some of the tools that we use for pedestrian crossings, and another reason why we believe the city scored well in the ATP program was the combination of pedestrian and bicycle benefit that the bike boulevards provide. So we don't know if we want to do neighborhood traffic circles at all these locations, but we drew them up so that we have the potential to do them. They have the benefit of twofold. One, cyclists can maintain their speed and momentum. Cross traffic will be required to stop on any automobile that's coming across on Chino, whereas through movements are allowed for both bicyclists and pedestrians on all the blocks. On a couple of the blocks, this orange signal here, or symbol rather, shows a potential location for a right turn only movement, in which case bicyclists will be allowed to go through, automobiles will be required to turn. So a lot of questions we get, like, what if I live here and I want to go to Carrillo in my car? Well, probably the easiest thing to do would be to pop out to San Andres and head down to Carrillo. If you want, you can come around on Gillespie and come around the backside. That's also possible. But what we found on our grid system when we model this is that trip times are unchanged. So people who want to drive for all their trips are pretty much going to be able to do that with just as much ease as they had before. And then at the same time, we get the benefit of reducing cut-through traffic and creating a really bicycle-friendly street. So, again, the connection to Carrillo is right here off your screen. This is the Micheltorena Green Lane Bridge. We believe that this particular section here by San Andres is going to be a little more expensive because we are going to have to widen the roadway there to fit the Class 2s at San Andres and Micheltorena. So that's one of the big-ticket items. We have approval from Caltrans. The Micheltorena Bridge does not belong to the city. It belongs to Caltrans, Crossing 101. They have written us an approval letter to put green lanes on there. So we really have lined up what we can to get this project going. And again, this is your location for the Castillo contraflow lane. Picking up here, if you're on a bike and you want to keep going towards the east side or towards the high school or even just to State Street, you'll use the Sola Bike Boulevard, which the big ticket items again here, we talked about earlier, $300,000 a pop, funded by the state taxpayers who buy fuel through the fuel tax. We're going to use that money to put in 4 signals and have that what we call a green wave. So if you're on a bike and you're doing about 10 to 13 or 14 miles an hour, you're going to trigger this signal and you're going to get to go all the way through. So that is going to really improve travel time. It's going to make people want to take Sola Street. If you take this Sola Street now, you're going to have to stop at De La Vina, Chapala, State, Santa Barbara, and Anacapa, and you're going to have to wait until it's very clear to get across. So that is a significant improvement. Again, continuing on Sola, in working with the fire department, we will probably have our last right turn only movement diverter around Garden or Laguna, but we can still have the signage, the striping, the greenback sharrows, and the bike boulevard conditions on these low-volume streets to get us over to Anapamu, Nopal. The high school is here. And then keep in mind, this green lane connector over on Cannon Perdido is your connection to the East Side project, which we also were awarded. So here's that same green line. This is where the upper end of the Alisos Bike Boulevard will be at Cannon Perdido. The extent is Cacique, which is already approved in Cycle 1 ATP funding for a bike boulevard on Cacique, which is now in design and environmental clearance. Construction forthcoming. And then you can also see the Coda-Haley Green Lane project, which will connect State Street and actually all the way over to Castillo and Bath, our existing couplet system, over to Alisos. So again, it's Rob's excitement, the city council's excitement, everyone who's involved has a level of excitement that we actually got these projects funded. We don't know when the money is going to come. That's the difficult part. So on the west side, we were designated to get money in 2019 and 2020 at the earliest to begin design, construction in 2020 and 2021. On the east side, we do have an opportunity to ask for advancing the funds by a year or two. We do believe that we're going to try for that. There were 40 projects that were eligible statewide. We're one of the 40 that's eligible to ask for advanced funding. It's a supplemental application. It's due December 30th. We think we have less than 50% chance to get it. But again, if we do, we can get projects on the ground sooner, achieve safety benefits sooner. So we may roll the dice on a supplemental application for the East Side project.
Quick question. I don't need a long answer. Is
Yes.
Haley's one way is Coda?
So that's a good question. So Haley is one way. Haley will be one way for both vehicles and bicyclists.
Mm-hmm.
Coda is currently two way.
Right.
And we do not know whether Coda will be two way or one way for vehicles. We do know that it'll be one way for bicyclists. So these will serve, much like Bath and Castillo do, as a one-way couplet for bicyclists. However, in the case of Coda, we have some preliminary study. We told the council we'd come back to them when we finalized it. Now that we got this grant money, we're in a really good position to look at one of two options, turning Coda into a one-way for some portion thereof, or doing what we proposed in the bike plan, which is removing parking on one side of the street. So that question is yet to be answered.
Well, Haley seems to be working very nicely. I take that street a lot, and the bikes are there, and the cars are there, and the one-way feels really good there for what it's worth.
Noted.
Yeah. Do you want to finish?
Sure.
Yeah. What do you think? Question? Go for it, Ms. Moore.
You mentioned I believe it was on Coda, that it's timed according to bicyclists going through it. On SOLA. So what is the mechanism of triggering that timing, the program timing?
It'll be bicycle actuation. So when your bicycle pulls up through a camera on the new signals that we build, it will know that there's a bicyclist there, and it will set in motion that coordination of the signals. We also have that coordinated with the one-way systems on those four arterials, so that they are then timed and connected so that the Micheltorena signal is connected with the SOLA signal, is connected with the Arriaga signal. So they'll all speak to each other and allow the platoons of automobiles to come through as soon as the bicycle green wave is cleared.
We better hope that the electricity doesn't go out.
Rare occurrence.
Okay. Thank you.
They do flash, yeah.
Oh, that's the default.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Moving on. I just included this slide just to see some of those same tools. Derek, again, earlier went into what the narrowing of pedestrian crossing enhancement is, reducing pet exposure. That is something that we've built into the bike boulevards. We've also got a look at what some of the traffic circles and diverters look like, neighborhood traffic circle, and then diverters for cars to be turning right and cyclists to be allowed to go through. And I was just wrapping up and ready for your comments and questions, and thank you for those early ones.
Great. Actually wondering if we could we do have public comment, so if folks are willing to go to that now. Is that fine? Okay. So we have one public comment slip from Eve Sanford.
Okay. Thanks, Hillary. Okay, I just am here to congratulate the city on your significant win, all these awesome funded grant applications, and sitting in the audience, it feels like we were just here talking about the bike master plan and how much the community needed this connection. So I'm really impressed by just how responsive you were and to the community's cycling needs. And it's great to see that even in such a competitive process, the city of Santa Barbara was able to score not one but two applications. And so that's just excellent, and we're really excited. The coalition hopes to, of course, just continue to be a partner to the city as they move forward with the projects. A number of our members have expressed a lot of excitement about cycling on these projects and live near these projects and would love to have a say on some of the sort of finer nuances that will still be worked out. And as you consider like your design options, like where would those roundabouts go and other things like that. Specifically, I think it's going to be an exciting opportunity on the Castillo contraflow lane to sort of figure out how that design is going to work and how cyclists are going to transition from Sola to Castillo, and then also from Castillo making that left turn when they're westbound onto Micheltorena. I think that is going to take some creative thinking, but it can be definitely done in a way that is good for everyone, walking, biking, driving. And I'll just finish by saying that the Green Lane project, especially the portion that's going to be on Micheltorena, is going to be really exciting, and I think an iconic project in terms of where the city is going with the bike master plan and encouraging new people to cycle. And of course, because the green is so visible, it'll be a pretty significant change for our streets. But I think that it is significant changes such as those that help people who are interested in cycling but just haven't, taken that leap of faith of getting out there on a bike. I think it's those visible cues that will encourage that behavior change and in the end be great for the entire transportation system, because once those people are on their bikes, everything will hopefully just continue to flow a lot smoother, and it'll be better for the people and better for the city altogether. And I'd also just like to take one quick moment to thank Susan and Hillary for helping out with the bike count. So the Bike Coalition recently did a bike count, and we counted 17 locations in Santa Barbara, and a number of those are queued up to get awesome bike lanes and curb extensions and things like that. And so we're hoping to get some before data and see how people respond afterwards. So thank you for volunteering.
You're
Congrats,
welcome.
City of SB, Peter, Rob.
Thank you. All right, so questions and comments from committee members. Ms. Rodriguez?
Yeah, just a simple congratulations. My goodness, this is really spectacular. And, you guys set the bar so high, it gets a little harder every year, right?
Other questions or comments? Well, I'll say congratulations. Last cycle, we were like, we got 6.4 million. Aren't we a big deal? And now it's even more. So we'll be expecting 8.6 next time. So just get ready for that. I think we're piece by piece going to be increasingly hated by other jurisdictions around the state. I'm fine with that. Fine with that. I know that people have major frustrations with the ATP program, but I'm glad that for some reason our city has figured it out. And it is, we were just saying it seems like this committee hasn't met in a long time, which is true. It's November now. We last met in April. But the last time we were here, we didn't even have an adopted bike plan. And now these projects are funded, or almost funded, slated for funding. And so I think that's a big deal. I hope, all the meetings we had we had a full chamber of people, commenting on the bike plan. I'm sure they're all at home watching this, but I hope that the public knows that, the city is really moving quickly in the right direction. And it's great to see that happen. And obviously, as we've said on almost every item tonight, funding is their biggest challenge. And so this is a huge help. So, Mr. Burnham.
I echo the congratulations to Mr. Brown and the staff. One quick question, though. I've heard of projects coming up against unforeseen elements and things, and if there's an overreach of cost for anything that comes up, that may not have been anticipated before, how is that? Is there a contingency, to cover shortfalls, cost shortfalls? Kind of a theoretical question.
No, understood. Madam Chair and Committee Member Burnham, we did build a 15% contingency into these projects.
Mm-hmm.
We also felt that since we weren't using local funds and we were asking for statewide funds, that we should ask for the most high-level project that we could. So we built that in. The projects that were funded are at the higher end of the estimate in terms of everything we have, and we also did the financing out to what the value of the money would be in 5 years because we knew it would be a ways out there. So we think we're covered. We have flexibility to fund those projects if we run into delays or shortfalls.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions, comments? No? All right. Yeah, please.
Two things. One, this is a staff recommendation from the California Transportation Commission staff. Their board acts on this item on December 7th and 8th down in Riverside. So at that point, we will know for sure if we get funded. So I just wanted to throw that out there so that everybody knows that's when it'll be final. When
Try
the board
not
acts.
to blow it between now and then.
We'll do our best.
Okay, great.
And then we also applied for a third project, which we received in cycle 2, I believe, environmental design for Las Positas MODOC. We went for about $12 million in construction funds. We didn't make the cutoff in terms of scoring and points. So we will continue to pursue funds for that project in future cycles.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, great. I think you're staying up for item number 6, an update on car share.
So car share is the next item? Okay. So in somewhat contradiction to the prior item where we were talking about how successful we were in anticipating the timing and how things would work, if you would have asked Mr. Dayton or myself 5 or 6 months ago, when would car share be on the ground, we were saying in November 2016, car share, we would have car share cars available in the city, and we don't yet on city streets. We're close, and so the update that I wanted to provide for you and your committee and the public is that we have begun negotiations with Zipcar, who was the top bidder on our RFP. They are providing car share services worldwide. They have many locations in Southern California, and the cities that work with them have had a lot of success. We are looking at starting with around 10 cars, which is what we thought we would start with. We are looking at various neighborhoods where we could use those locations, and including the downtown, potentially the train depot, and certainly some of our higher active transport neighborhoods would be good locations. So I spoke with the city attorney's office today. We made some more progress this week, and we will keep you posted when we get them into contract and get their cars on the ground. They probably need 2 to 3 months from contract closing to designate spaces, put up signage, paint, those type of things. We have put in the contract that will be on the car share provider's responsibility to do that, and so we look forward to bringing you more positive news on that when we get that on the ground.
Great. Questions? Yeah, Mr. Burnham?
Mr. Brown, you mentioned starting with 10 cars. Have you laid any initial layout as far as how many and where these stations are located?
Well, we have some ideas that are based on where our current low vehicle ownership rates are, where people would be apt to use vehicles, and where people are already taking transit, biking, and walking a lot. A lot of folks who have a lot of trips in the active mode, as we call it, also have needs for access to automobile from time to time. So we have an idea that the area around Cottage Hospital, the Micheltorena corridor, the west side, the east side, downtown, the exact locations we haven't identified. We want to get Zipcar in a contract and meet with their staff to finalize the locations as a team. But we also, Committee Member Burnham, we have a lot of flexibility on where those go. So we want to see how the first 10 perform and if we want to add new cars at new locations.
Thank you. And then my other question is, what kind of public outreach or education effort is there initially to really help the public become really aware of what car share is and how it can benefit people?
Well, we knew that would be an issue, and we put that in the RFP that Zipcar would do that. They're good at it already. It is to their benefit to have the cars leased out for the maximum amount of time. The other part that you probably heard Mr. Dayton say before is that a Zipcar, for those that are sighted, of course, on the street is the best advertising because people drive by it, they walk by it. They're going to be at corner locations. We won't have them in mid blocks. So that is going to be one of the best advertising tools.
Thank you. Okay.
Great. Other questions? Okay. Yeah, Mr. France?
Thank you, Chair Blackerby. Quick question. Is this just a no-cost RFP, or what's the structure of this?
Yeah, so the cost is to Zipcar. The only cost to city is staff time. And what we've done is we've looked at the maximum amount we can charge in a city garage, which is around $160 a month. And we've asked Zipcar if they are willing to pay around that amount of money to lease each space, whether it's 10 in the future, it might be 20 or 30 or more. It's $160 a space. So we will use that money to administer the program. It won't generate a lot of revenue for the city, but it'll generate enough to do cost recovery.
Cool. That's. I think that such a program would merit all types of support, and it's amazing that you are able to do that without.
Can you just, excuse me, I'm tired. Can you give me just a couple names of cities where Zipcar is?
Yeah, so Santa Monica, Pasadena, Los Angeles. They are actually surrounding the city of Santa Barbara. We're like a donut hole in the center. But if you go to Isla Vista, Santa Barbara Airport, Westmont, Santa Barbara City College has Zipcars. So if you have a Zipcar membership, you can get a car very close to here, but you can't get it in the downtown. So that's the barrier that we're looking to get through.
Oh, okay.
Great question.
Other questions?
Thank you.
Is there any public comment on this item? Any other comments, anything from the committee? Great. We're excited to learn more. Can't wait to find out when it happens or when it's going to happen, and we'll help get the word out. So number 7, our final item is a Vision Zero update. Still Mr. Brown. Go ahead.
I'll just stand right here, Chair Blackerby, and continue. This should be another 10 or 12 slide item. Similar to what the council saw a month ago, I wanted to walk you through the Vision Zero initiative because we hadn't talked about it with this committee. We were very involved in the bike plan, but one of the directions we got last year from City Council was when you're done with the bike plan, bring us back some options of what Vision Zero would look like. So we did that last month with them. We're doing that today with your committee. So it was almost a year and a half ago when council said, staff, develop a Vision Zero policy for Santa Barbara and bring it back to us and tell us what that would look like and what it would cost and how you would implement it. So just so that we're all on the same page, Sweden is one of the leaders, and back almost 20 years ago now, they had the idea that we have too many deaths and they're on our transportation system and they're preventable. So what can we do about them? This graphic, which is a nice one, shows the number of deaths since they adopted their program, which is around here, has continued to fall. This drop here, the U.S. saw a similar one. This drop was basically a policy and safety drop That's when seatbelts became required, when drunk driving became illegal. We made huge strides worldwide. Many countries did in making this drop. This drop here for Sweden was really based upon their Vision Zero principles. The blue line is showing traffic VMT mostly, so the number of people driving and the amount of miles they're driving. So this graphic is powerful in the sense that transportation can continue to happen, but it does so in a much safer way. So here's a quotation from one of the founders saying, "The deaths of the traveling public are preventable, and society should not accept that any person should be killed or seriously injured while using the transportation system." So that's one of the basic principles of Vision Zero. In the United States, in that period, I'd say about 20 to 25 years ago, we were in that 50,000 deaths per year. That's come down significantly, again, due to the safety and the policy changes we've made. But still, in 2014, there were 33,000 nationwide transportation-related deaths. In the airline industry, in 2014, there were 0 on U.S. soil. So the airline industry, in a sense, you commonly hear it's the safest way to travel. From a statistical standpoint, it really is. If the airline industry had the similar number of deaths that the transportation system on the ground did, it would be 82 747s coming down every year. That's 2 a week. So if 2 747s came out of the sky every week, the public would cry out about it. But we don't quite hear the same level of outcry on the ground transportation system. So Vision Zero attempts to address that. How does it do it? The 3 E's, you hear E's in other particular programs. In this case, it's engineering, enforcement, and education. Those are our tools, and our program will use all 3. And just so you know, we're looking at both fatalities and serious injuries, which are defined as a collision that requires a trip to the hospital immediately. That's how we define a serious collision or a serious injury. So we've done some data crunching. We've done some mapping, and I'll show you a couple of those outputs. We've also broken the city. I think we're going to need to do this now more often into the city council districts. But this map that's in your handout shows the number of fatalities in the last 15 years by their mode and their location. So in the city of Santa Barbara, luckily for us, it's not 33,000. It's 40 over the last 15 years. So between 2001 and 2015, we've sadly lost 40 individuals in our city in these locations. And I believe the red is people that were in automobiles. 5 people were on bicycle, and 20 people were on foot.
So 50% were pedestrian.
Correct. That's shown again here, as Committee Member Berman just pointed out, half the pie are PEDs. And if you ask how Santa Barbara's travel, the most common mode of transport, and this is how people get to work, which is where we have the most data, is by automobile. But in terms, if you add the people that are biking and walking, they're making up 13% of the trips, but yet they comprise 63% of the fatalities. So this is how we identify what we call our high exposure population. So biking and walking, you don't have 2 or 3 or 4,000 pounds of steel surrounding you, and so your chances of dying go up. Committee Member Burnham?
Any stats on people on motorcycles? Is that a subcategory?
It is wrapped into one of these, but it's around 1 or 2% in our city in terms of travel to work.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had another odd question, but I'll wait till you're done.
Okay, sounds good. Here's a look at a map that shows the same 15-year history, 01 to 15, and we are looking now at more than one serious collision at a location that kind of shows that Upper State Street, not surprisingly, the Mission Corridor, Carrillo, Lower State, and again, Cliff Drive, Shoreline, Cabrillo, and again, this is kind of overlapping some of those opportunity areas that Mr. Bailey showed you earlier, Coast Village Road. We know where these things are occurring, and one of the first things we need to do is strategically address how we're going to go about that. 60% of our collisions that have severes and fatals are in 10% of our city streets. In a sense, that's good because we can direct our resources towards those 10% of our streets. So what are we doing now? Well, you've heard from your staff for the many years now, and especially tonight, that we have an engineering safety focus. We're looking at collision trends. We already do this. This will all fall into our Vision Zero program. In other words, some of this won't be something new. It's something that's already ongoing. And we'll do it incrementally over time. There's some of the rapid flashing beacons here. I think this example, Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, this is Carrillo and Anacapa. That's right. So we had a high collision rate here, and we analyzed that, and we realized that the size of the signal was not big enough. They were 8 inches. We went to 12 inches, and all of a sudden we got much more compliance at this location. We reduced collisions significantly. So that's one of our success stories. The police department has struggled with staffing, and we think that we're turning a corner. And so enforcement is going to be a key piece of this. In other words, if we don't have people complying with the rules of the road, we're going to have more issues. Here's an example of one of those pedestrians that has the right-of-way in the California Vehicle Code, but is not being given that by the vehicle there. So we definitely need to coordinate with police. The new police chief is on board. We met with her. She's excited about the program. So we look forward to future collaboration, even more so with the police department, even though we've done great so far. This piece here, the education piece, is probably the place where we can do the most good. So for little amounts of money, right now we spend around $15,000 a year in Safe Routes to School programs. It's all education-based for youngsters. But our adult population are the ones driving, and sometimes not so safely. So what part of this program will do is look at public service announcements, messages, strategic media strategies. We want everyone in Santa Barbara to know that we're a Vision Zero city and that they have a responsibility to behave accordingly. So we'll have a big education push, both what we're doing now with the youth, but also in the future with the adults. So the last couple slides talk about the grant that we submitted, I think it was November 3rd. So just a couple weeks ago or a week and a half ago, that went in. It's a little more than $200,000, but it will look to develop a plan. Us planners like plans. So we want to know what we're going to do, where we're going to do it, and how we're going to do it. We're going to look at those 10 to 15 priority corridors. We're going to do the awareness program, fully staffing the traffic enforcement unit. I think sometimes we bounce between 2 and 4 officers. Santa Maria has 13. They're the same size as us. So we need to get our staffing up to levels that are normal. And then, of course, safety first. Rob, can you help us out with that tagline that your group came up with?
Yes, the Public Works new prioritization is safety first, fix it second, and then make it better.
So that's a great strategy that wraps it up. We want to make things better, but safety first, fix it next, then make it better. That is our priority, with or without Vision Zero.
Could you expand on that a little bit? What that
Sure.
means?
So what that means is that if we're analyzing projects, if it's a project that, say, something aesthetic or landscaping or something that makes things beautiful, that's great. Santa Barbara's all about that. We want to do that. But we also need to balance that against the other two questions. Is it a maintenance issue that we need to repair something? That would be priority number 2. And is someone at danger? That would be priority number 1. So it's just a quick way of reminding us what the rank order is for what we do. So again, just a reminder on the direction from council. This is what the Vision Zero policy will say, that we would like to have 0 severe and fatal collisions by 2030. That is tentatively scheduled for December 6th to go to council for final adoption, that resolution. The other thing is, as I mentioned on November 3rd, the amount we're asking for in the grant is $180,000. That'll be split fairly evenly between the education campaign and the development of that implementation strategy. The $45,000 match, this program that we applied for, fortunately for us, cash strapped, allows us to use staff time in kind. And so we will qualify for the match with staff time and without cash. So that's good for us. And then just the last slide, again, takes it right out of the grant itself. What will the project do? What are the project goals? It's to develop an implementation strategy that results in system improvements between 2017 and 2030. I put the engineering up there, the ENG. Create strong participation with stakeholders, nonprofits. I know that SB Bike and Coast are the big proponents of this and have been active and involved. The school districts are here. The chamber is on board. They wrote us a letter of support. The county public health department is on board. Of course, the police department, that's our enforcement. And since the money that we're applying for will be coming from Caltrans, they'll also presumably be one of our active partners if we're successful. And then the final piece is education, integrated community-wide public messaging campaign on how individuals can improve public safety with their own behavior. And I'm ready to take your questions and comments.
Mr. Burnham?
Madam Chair, Mr. Brown, this is kind of an odd array of questions here, but can someone tell me, first of all, did Proposition D pass for the city?
Measure D?
Measure D.
Yes, it did.
Okay, because Proposition 64 also passed. The reason I ask is because you were talking about public awareness and safety education to reduce DUIs. Are there any preliminary data available regarding how intoxication from marijuana translates into intoxication levels that would constitute a DUI? I guess that's my odd question.
Yeah, we've actually been talking about that this week. It's a really good question, and we have to work that out. California, we imagine, will have to look at what Colorado's done already. But if you saw the 60 Minutes presentation on Colorado's marijuana passage, it's pretty old, dated now. Maybe it's 8 months. Could have been a year. But they had to. They're inventing government. They have this process where they're inventing government in process to address issues that arise. And so I would imagine the state of California will have to do a little both, looking at what Colorado's learned already, and then finding out based on experience. But we will probably be told that as an agency because it'll be a California code section, and police officers will have to enforce that once that's established. It has not yet been established.
And then, but I do know, I just happen to know that the part of Prop 64, there's a taxation piece, and that money goes to research on this and to enforcement on those types of things. So there definitely are people working on that exact thing right now.
Sounds like some pretty groundbreaking data that we'll have to assimilate into in furthering Vision Zero.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I just had one comment. I think because of being on this committee, I have noticed astonishingly how many people jaywalk, and like one car length away from an intersection, they'll scoot across the street. And I just want to kind of put it on public record that I think for the education component, it takes away all the benefit of everything we do when people they're so unwilling to walk a few more feet to get across the street in a safe zone. It really astonishes me how often I see that, and I know it's because of my heightened awareness.
Committee Member Rodriguez, one thing I'll point out that backs up statistically, I mean, this is a data-driven process. So that's one of the nice things about Vision Zero is we don't do anything unless we have the data to support it. So when we looked at the 20 PED fatalities in the last 15 years, 14 of those, the pedestrian was at fault. It was a PED right-of-way violation. So that is a huge part. A driver who doesn't expect a pedestrian to be in the right-of-way and found one there, 10 of those 14 were at night. So we definitely have some of those issues to address.
Even that sort of data that you just stated, if that could be in the brochures or the public service announcements on the television, like you just said, 20 people were killed, 14 of them were pedestrians in the wrong place. That would hopefully send a message, especially if you have people taking their kids and running across a roadway when there's a sidewalk crossing right
while they're
down the
looking
road.
at their phone and sending a text.
Yeah, not too great modeling, but important message, I think.
Yep. Ms. Warren?
Peter, I wanted to ask you about the meeting. This is December 6th. The council will see this. Will they be seeing the same PowerPoint we just saw and the same explanations?
Committee Member Horn, they saw this on October 18th, I believe. So they got this information, they moved the item, they directed us to apply for the grant. What they see on December 6th is most apt to be a consent item, adopting the resolution and setting the goal. And then I think it's April, I looked up the notification from Caltrans, April 2017. We have a 5-month wait to find out if we got the grant. If we don't get the grant, we still think we can do probably a bare bones type of Vision Zero program. But the grant really is our key to success in the sense that it has education money in it. We can do a really bang-up implementation strategy. Otherwise, we'll be doing an implementation plan that uses only in-house resources and wraps in a lot of what we're already doing.
Yeah, I would mention that I've been watching the Santa Maria City funded videos. Rob, you said you have the copies of those in your department? So those are great models for the education implementation for pedestrians and also for drivers. They're really great, and they're all showing local intersections, local situations, within Santa Maria, and hopefully we could do something similar. But anyway, great job on this.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I failed to ask if there was any public comment. Don't see any. So are there any more questions or comments on this? Okay. Fingers crossed for more grant success. Yes. Great. Anything else, Ms. Brown? Okay. So before we adjourn, I just want to note that Cynthia Bosch, a member of this committee, is no longer here, and she's actually moved out of town. So we didn't get to say goodbye at this committee, but I just wanted to thank her. I highly doubt she's watching this, but I just want to thank her for her service on this committee and everything that she brought to it with her expertise, especially in the transit space, and as a bike rider and a longtime resident here. So just wanted to say thank you to her for her service, and she will be missed. And I also want to just mention, since it is transportation related, that I'm going to be taking on a new position professionally working with Santa Barbara MTD as their new marketing and community relations manager starting on the 21st. So I'll still be around, but I'll be wearing a different hat out in the community, and definitely hope to work with all of you to help improve and promote our transit service. So any other announcements, comments, anything else from staff?
Only that we have a special meeting for December 8th, and we just want to make sure that we'll have a quorum for that meeting. So we're looking for 4 people at least to be available for December 8th.
What's the day?
That's a Thursday.
Mm-hmm. That works for me.
Yeah, I think I can do that.
Okay.
5:30.
I'm seeing at least 4 nods.
5:30.
Be 5:30, yes. I think so. Same location.
Okay.
Excellent. Yeah. Then we'll plan that, and at that meeting we'll be talking about traffic modeling and the update of the traffic model. So that should be very interesting. We'll also be hearing about the capital improvement program and all the engineering projects, transportation projects that will be moving forward in preparation for our 6-year capital improvement program, which will be going to council on April next year.
Ms. Moore?
What does traffic modeling mean?
Our traffic model it's a way that we can predict what traffic will do in the future. So what it does is we use existing counts and the land use data to set how much land use is producing and where trips are going. And then we validate that, and actually a little bit regionally. And then we validate that existing model and make sure it's accurate and the predictions are predicting what's actually on the street. And then we use those assumptions to predict years ahead, accounting for the land use we anticipate to be added and other changes that will take place on the highway. Specifically, Highway 101 expansion is one of those things. And then we can anticipate what are the areas of congestion that we'll have in the future. And we can use that tool for planning and for land development applications.
Great, thank you.
Great. Anything else? All right. We're adjourned.
Perfect.